Hi, this is Ed Weinberg. I'm with CTRE Investors, and this is our regular broadcast. We do an interview like this every couple of weeks. I am a real estate agent at Keller Williams in Trumbull, Connecticut. And today we're going to be talking about fair housing with Bob DeCosmo. Bob is the CEO of Tenant Tracks. They provide a tenant check service. He's also chairman and treasurer of the Property Owners Defense League PAC and president of the CT Property Owners Alliance. So I know we've got some people out there who are watching, or if you're watching on the replay, please hit the like button so I know you're there. You can hit the love, you can hit a, or even hit the cry button. But let me know you're there. Feel free to ask any questions. And I see Steve there. I see a couple of other people who I can't tell. Okay, so if you're watching and you're not a friend of mine on Facebook, they've changed things around a little. I can't see your name. I can see that you loved it, and I can see that you were surprised, but I can't see your name. So if you're going to give me a comment, then tell me who you are, assuming you want me to know who you are. So why don't we go to Bob DeCosmo, and Bob, you can tell us a little bit about what it is that your organizations do.
Hey, hi, Ed. How are you tonight?
So tell me about Tenant Tracks. What does Tenant Tracks do?
Tenant Tracks provides property owners and realtors with a comprehensive background check. Before you hand over the keys to your prospective tenant, the number one way to prevent evictions is do a proper tenant screening. And we actually got into the business on the recommendation from the lobbyists from the Legal Aid Society, because we had been trying for years to change the laws in Connecticut about the eviction process. And he just came up to me after one public hearing and says, Bob, why don't you just teach your landlords that it's the 11th of the month, and if they haven't paid rent, start the eviction. Number two, work with different lawyers that specialize in evictions so that you can get better service at reduced rates. And number three, have your landlords do a background check. So those three recommendations made sense to my brain, and my original plan was to go in and resell someone's report, just act as a middleman. What we uncovered was the data in Connecticut was so horrible that nobody had all of the evictions in a database that was electronically searchable. So we had to go into 7 courts here in Connecticut every month and pull out court files and put our own database together. Because if you go on the Connecticut Judicial website, it contains 6 out of the 15 courts where evictions were occurring. So we built the company around the concept that better data is going to yield a better result. And if you screen your tenants before you hand over the keys, most likely you're not going to get involved in some of these knockdown, drag-out evictions.
So do you, Steve, do you just do Connecticut, or do you do nationwide, or some services just in Connecticut?
Sure, no. We actually do national, but we looked at 2 different. Connecticut has one loophole, which was the eviction data, and we are also moving into Massachusetts, which is another state that's interesting because you cannot get a criminal background out of the state of Massachusetts unless you buy it from the state police. And they charge $25 to do the background for you. It takes a couple of days. So we actually have access to arrest records from Massachusetts, which are allowable when you're doing a background check. You cannot deny an applicant based upon the mere presence of an arrest record, but you can then question the tenant and make them prove that the case was dismissed or whatever the outcome was. So we're filling voids in the data universe, both here in Connecticut and here in Massachusetts with Tenant Tracks. But literally, it's the same kind of regurgitated data nationally. There's only a couple of databases that exist in the country for national criminal or national evictions and credits. So, but we just cobbled together a better mousetrap specific to Connecticut and Massachusetts, and that's what we do.
Okay. And so tell me a little bit about what the Property Owners Defense League does and the CT Property Owners Alliance.
Let's talk about the Property Owners Alliance first. That's had a 23-year run at existence, and we've been up there since the mid 1990s and advocating, and I use the word advocating as opposed to lobbying, for property owner rights. And we've been involved in just about every discussion or policy pertaining to housing, for the last 20 years. We initially had a great run of success from the mid 90s through around 2001. And something happened in 2001, which was the real estate market started to go vertical. So as people began to make more and more money with investment real estate, less people were involved with the landlord groups across Connecticut. And I'm guilty myself because, 01, 02, 03, I wasn't at the Capitol. I was busy developing property. I got back up there in 06, and the whole game had changed. I walked into identification of a landlord, responsibility of a landlord, making blight liens, super liens, and prioritize over your mortgages. So in those 5 years, the focus went on from changing eviction laws to benefit the landlords and defending against lead paint to we're going to arrest landlords and go after their checkbooks. So since 2007, it's been, we've been battling every year up at the Capitol. Last year, I hit the wall. Just to be blunt, we put a bill in to deal with fair housing, and we've had so many complaints about once accused of committing discrimination, the only way you could defend yourself logically is write a check. The harder you dig in, the harder you try to clear your name, the more it's going to cost you. So we started calling this an entrapment and an extortion scheme. And we put a bill in that was going to create sort of an equal process between landlord and tenants in terms of the rights going through the system. And they flipped the bill on us 180 degrees. So what was a bill that was intended to help landlords became a bill to help tenants and further the agency. And when I saw that happen, I says, I'm done. I says, Einstein says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different outcome. So I'm done with going to the Capitol. The only way you're going to change things is, and what we did was we created the Property Defense League PAC. Because if you have the same players at the Capitol, things will never change. So the sole purpose for the PAC is to change the outcomes of elections. And we're looking at about 9 races here in Connecticut, some Senate races, some House races, where we've identified representatives that were, one, supportive to landlords that need to be, basically they need some defense. 2, legislators that are hostile to landlords, and we want to go out there and put them on the unemployment line. So it's pretty much why that's where we are right at the moment.
Okay. Just if you're joining us now, this is Ed Weinberg. I'm a real estate agent with Keller Williams. Just want to plug our groups and our websites here. You can find us at the group on Facebook, CTRE Investors. Also at CTREinvestors.com. And you can find my real estate agent site at edsellsmyhouse.com. Now, if you're just joining us here, if you write comments, I can see the comments. There's a possibility I may not be able to see your name. So if you want to say who you are, or you just want to be anonymous, either one works. And again, if you're watching us on the replay or you're watching us live, go and show us some love by pushing the like button or the love button. All right, let's bring, this is, by the way, we are with Bob DeCosmo, and let me bring Bob in. And Bob, you want to tell us a little bit about what's happening legislatively?
Sure. We've got 6 days left before the session ends. And currently there's, 7 or 8 bills that are impacting housing that are still alive and kicking, which is a large amount of bills for this late stage of the session. Now, there's a couple of bills that are concerning to me, not the way that they're written as is, but what can morph out of these bills next year. Because the way things work up at the state capitol is, the old saying is, how do you eat an apple? It's you take one bite at a time. So if you get a bill on the books, it becomes a statute. It's really easy to go back next year and change a couple of words. So there's one proposal right now that it deals with short-term property rentals. And on the face of the proposal, it's Senate Bill 356. It's Senate Calendar number 103. It's basically it's looking at the Airbnbs where people can come in and rent out their house for the weekend, and they're looking for control over that short-term, less than 30-day rental. And there's a host of requirements that come with it, which includes registration with the city, meeting zoning requirements, licensing with the towns. But the problem with this, Ed, is that if that bill becomes a law, then next year all you've got to do is eliminate the words short-term rental and substitute, it's just a strike all, and then it's any property rental. And now you've got landlord licensing required with, whatever the local ordinances are that you have to jump through those hoops and whatever fees they want to charge.
But there is local licensing in certain towns around Connecticut now, isn't there?
Registration, I would say, is a more appropriate
inspection.
Correct. There's property inspection, like they have certificates of compliance programs. Those things to me are, it's a double-edged sword for the landlord, because if you have a city that's like Meriden runs a program, they go in, they inspect. I think it's like $10 every 2 years. It's a nominal cost. If the unit's certified, then there's some protections there for that property owner that says, hey, I've got a certificate of compliance and this wasn't broken. Now it is. Clearly, Mr. Tenant, Mrs. Tenant, you're responsible for this damage. Then you got like the town of Mansfield that charges $150 a year. And then we had what was proposed in New Britain where they wanted 5% of your gross rents. So, you see the local extremes. So the debate is, do you want these things? What protections really exist for the property owner? And, or has this become a revenue grab, a money grab? And New Britain started at 5% of your gross rent. They passed the ordinance at $150 a unit. So that's, those are the downsides of the licensing. And, but that's just one of the bills. There's another bill that I'm working aggressively on to kill, and that's House Bill 5376. And that wants to limit your ability to raise a tenant's rent. It's rent control. But right now the caveat is if you take federal or state funding to upgrade a unit, then you're going to be restricted in the amount of rent you could charge for that unit. And they pegged the index to the CPI. And, we know that property taxes and insurance costs aren't part of that CPI. So, it's just bad equation. But again, why would we want to put something on the books that says, you're limited into what you can charge, between an arm's length transactions for renting your units? So those two bills, normally, those kinds of bills would have died early on in the session. So I'm looking at this stuff. This is a signal. And this is not necessarily this is not a good thing for property owners. It may be a bad thing. There's a couple of other bills. 5182 is out there, and that's actually passed the House. And what this bill says is that it's going to create a mechanism for the city to fine a landlord if they uncover that there's some work done on your property that required a permit and you never pulled a permit. Well, the damn problem with this is who did the work. Now, if you just bought a property from a third party, or you bought a property 2 years ago and they did not pull a mechanical permit, and the city comes in and does one of these routine inspections and questions you, and if you don't have the documentation, fines of up to $1,000. So that bill's out of the. I mean, it's already passed the House. It's on the Senate calendar. And there's a couple of other property owner bills that like we're talking about service pets and companion pets.
You were telling me that there's a difference between them
Well,
and that we can handle them differently if a tenant comes and says he has one.
we're going to rip open the lid to the can of worms, because by definition there is no difference between companion pet, service pet, and emotional support animal, according to the tenant advocates. So they're all treated the same. You can't refuse. But the service pets, obviously they provide a need. They help a human being overcome a physical disability. Seeing eye dog, hearing this, impaired. The emotional support animals and the companion pets, we really can't ask what disability your animal is overcoming. But what's happened is that people have used the emotional support animal, companion pet, as a way to get around a no lease policy. So you can't really ask what the disability is. You can ask for a letter from a practitioner to explain what the shortcome is to overcome.
So they can the letter can say that it's medically necessary for them to have the animal. Is that correct?
Well, worse is it can come off the internet by a third party company that will certify that you need one.
Okay.
And there hasn't been any case base established. So when you hear that you are entitled to ask for a letter signed by a, and again, the word licensed, or recognized, we're going into the gray areas, stating the need for the animal to overcome the disability. But clearly, this is a very fluid situation, because we just did two back-to-back presentations because of equal opportunity in housing, the 50-year anniversary for fair housing, and I had two representatives from the same organization basically give two different opinions. And this organization would be the one that would sue you if, in fact, you said the wrong thing. So, one speaker says if they come up to you with a phony certificate from the internet, tell them to throw it in the garbage. And the other speaker says, well, you don't necessarily have to see a person to get the certificate. You can go through an online correspondence kind of a program, and they wouldn't be so dismissive of a certificate that you buy on the internet. So what we're trying to do is to actually define what are permissible companions. For instance, if someone brought in a farm animal currently under Connecticut law, you can't say no. Sheeps, donkeys, goats, they would.
Now there are local laws. I'm not certain where I live. I'm allowed to have livestock.
Yeah.
So does this supersede the local zoning that
Yes.
tells me that I
Yes.
can't go out and grab some cream from Bessie for my coffee tomorrow?
From our understanding, the answer would be absolutely yes. The law on from Americans with Disabilities would oversee your local zoning. So we're looking to get some clarification as to size, number. How many do you really need? How many cats do you really need? Is it one? Is it two? Is it five? Is it 10? And again, we've got all the stories that I'm like the magnet for getting the phone calls. And people says, it's you get the calls. 5 cats. Is 5 too many? No. Owner is complaining. Health department, the stink because they never cleaned the litter box. Other tenants in the building were complaining. Health department recognized it, and the tenant went out and got an advocate and threatened to sue the owner for violating their civil rights, the Americans with Disability Act, and the 5 cats became support animals. Owner could not evict. So it became. You see this. What's the right number? How about breed restrictions? You got an insurance policy. Your policy says you can't have a pit bull or a Doberman, and You got a tenant that says, this is my companion pet. Your insurance company is going to drop you because you've got it in your property. What do you do? So, there's a conversation that needs to happen. It has to talk about the breed restrictions. It has to talk about the number. It literally should define what a support animal is. Is a support peacock acceptable? I mean, we saw that recently in the news. Is 5 pit bulls too many? So we're trying to get at the conversation, and it's been 2 years. We're trying to get this dialogue going, and the legislators don't want to engage in the dialogue. So 2 years, 2 bills. Last year, the bill just died. It never made it. Never made it over into the Environment Committee. And this year, a bill was introduced that says that if you misrepresent the need for a support animal, that you would pay a fine. It would basically be kind of a crime. And we can't have that in Connecticut. So that bill got gutted, and it turned around into, well, we're going to create a pamphlet to explain, why you can't deny a service animal. So that bill has not been called to the floor. And if it does, it's going to get jumped with an amendment going back to how many, what's the size. So we're just getting very little progress right now on this important topic, because people are they're abusing it, again, it's
So one of the things that we said in the promo is that you're going to tell us what to say on the telephone or what not to say on the telephone. So I get a call. What am I not supposed to say, or what am I supposed to say?
Well, right now you and I are talking through our smartphones. Most people don't have this ability when they're talking on the telephone. So they're talking to someone they don't know. And you don't know if that call is coming from an actual tenant, it's coming from a tester sanctioned by the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities or the Connecticut Fair Housing Center, or it's coming from somebody that's doing their own independent sting, which has happened in Connecticut. We had one girl that literally went out and put an ad on Craigslist and said, I'm looking for an apartment. I'm a great tenant, quiet. We'll pay, between $700 and $800 a month, up to 2 months deposit if the apartment's right. Email me or text me. And she then went about to engage in conversations about Section 8 and state security deposit guarantees. And people responded in writing via text and says, I don't know anything about the Section 8 program, so I don't think I'm interested. That's the wrong answer. So she made 5 complaints to the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities and hired a private landlord, a private lawyer to represent her claims, and asked for $40,000 for each claim. So it was a $200,000 ask to the Commission on Human Rights and Opportunities. I took the case to the Chief State's Attorney's Office, and I'm screaming fraud, because there never was an intent to move in. So this was only an intent to entrap.
Okay, just so you know, we were saying that, when you're talking to somebody, wait a minute, there we go. Just so you know, when you're talking to somebody on the phone and you don't know, not only don't you know who they are, but if they're recording it, but just so you know, this is being recorded.
Our conversation.
And there could be right now. There could be there are other people listening right now.
Yeah. So that's we know that. But okay. what you say on the phone, and I say this is really what people have to understand. You don't know who you're talking to. So the you don't get into any discussions about, will you accept? Because the answer is you accept all qualified renters. You don't. If someone starts asking you about how many, I have a 2-bedroom apartment. How many people will you accept? Well, how many people could occupy an apartment? It's not based on the number of bedrooms. That's a misnomer. It's based upon the square footage of the unit and how many people are going to move in. So you have to measure the square footage of the bedrooms and the living room. Kitchens, bathrooms, pantries are out. And then it's 125 square feet per person. First one, 75 each additional. So literally you could have a 1-bedroom apartment with 4 people living in it. So it's not based on the number of bedrooms. Another big no-no is, you've got a son and a daughter. They have to have their own bedroom. That's not the law. You could have children of opposite sex sharing the same bedroom. There's no age restriction after the age of 2, after the age of 6 or 10. That's not the law. So those are some of the common pitfalls that you get on the phone when you're talking about responses. I always tell people, if you don't know, call the Fair Housing Center and ask, because they're the ones that are going to basically sue you in court. What you say on the phone is, yeah, our apartment's available. Come on down, fill out our application. We take an application. We want a background check on everybody over the age of 18, and do the backgrounds. Don't get into it's a nice location, it's close to this church, because those are all buzzwords that basically can come back to you at the end and be used against you. You never want to steer anybody in towards an apartment. We've seen housing authorities that have paid 6-figure settlements, saying things like, do you really want to live in Winstead because your job is 30 miles away and you don't have a car? It might be hard on you to live here and go to Glastonbury, go to work. I think that cost the Winstead Housing Authority $380,000. So what you basically say on the phone is as little as possible, and you want these people to show up and fill out an application, and then conduct a thorough, and I say background check. That doesn't just mean a tenant screening report. That means verify employment, verify their landlord, their current landlord. Go online and check with the city assessor that landlord really owns that building. I mean, years ago, I got burned by that because I was talking to a tenant's mother who, this woman and her husband and her kids were sleeping on the couch because they were evicted. And I'm talking to a landlord that gave them a glowing recommendation. That was her mother. Make sure that person really owns the building. It's sad to say this, Ed, but if you don't really do all the digging, there's a high probability you can get burned when you rent. And again, so getting back to the questions, lawful source of income, Section 8, you cannot refuse. Unemployment, can't refuse it. That costs.
So you can't, even though unemployment may run out next week, you still can't refuse it.
Lawful source of income, right? That cost the Hartford landlord $150,000.
Wow.
Yeah. He said, well, when you get a job, come back and talk to us. The irony of that case was that was a sting operation. So there never was a true tenant. They went after this landlord, and I won't say on tape why I thought they went after him, but they basically sent in people and when you get a job, come back. We'll entertain your application. Which, as you were going to allude to, if you're going to be unemployed and your benefits run out in 3 weeks, then what? Their theory was, well, I can go out and get a job tomorrow. So, $150,000 settlement, pretty extreme. Those are some of the more colorful cases. We've gotten involved in many recent cases where the outcomes were not a big settlement. That, I think, the problem that I have with the fair housing laws is there's been a move or a movement towards giving these big rewards to people in these cases for. I'm sorry to say this, but I've seen people that have gone through windshields of cars and have gotten less money than people that were told no over the telephone. And for me to believe that someone's life was ruined because they were told they couldn't have this apartment because the owner preferred to rent to people without children, and it was an owner-occupied two-family, but they had hired a realtor, and that realtor was very new, and made the misspeak of saying, well, my client prefers not to have children. $60,000.
Okay, so just to fill some people in, you can, if you are not a real estate agent and not using a real estate agent,
right,
and you are living in In Connecticut, it's up to a 2-family. You can say, I don't want this person on the other side, and you can do it for there are things where we have protected groups, and you can say that for based on anything except race. It's the only thing you can't say that for.
Yeah, and the irony is, you can't put that in your advertisement.
Well, you can't put it in your advertisement, and if a real estate agent is representing you, you cannot have that limitation. So you lose that.
Right. All bets are all those exclusions are off. And and again, you think about it. That's sad because you now have to take the phone call and have these people drive to look at your unit. And when they show up at your doorstep, you say, "No, you've got children. I don't want to rent to you."
Right. This is, of course, that is what we're talking about. Isn't something that happens a lot as far as people living in the other side. On the other part of the multifamily, but I guess it does happen from time to time.
No, and I mean,
any other anything else coming up in legislative that that we should know about?
There's one bill that would be good for us. I think it's good for us. Senate Bill 357, and it's looking to get some funding in for lead abatement of owners that have properties that may have older properties. And the original bill was $10 million, and $7 million for lead, and $3 million for blight. And I just kind of thought that was odd that you're going to do interior repairs, and then you're going to spend $3 million on basically probably bank-owned properties for exterior. So we recommend that. I actually oppose the bill, and I suggest that they take the other $3 million and earmark it for what we would call showstoppers for healthy homes and/or energy efficiency audits. When you go through these energy audits, Ed, you can go in, and it's a great program. People should take advantage of it because basically you're ratepayer money to get these audits done. But if they find certain conditions inside the unit, whether it's knob and tube wiring, or they find mold or asbestos wrap around the pipes, they have to stop the process right then and there. They can't proceed. So I was able to convince the housing committee that $3 million should be appropriated for solving those shortcomings, so that when people apply for an energy audit, they go into a unit and they find asbestos in the basement. There's now a source of money to come up with that $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 to get that wrap out of the unit. So 357 is still live and kicking. Let's see what other bills here. 5503, which is already kind of on the books. If you harm a service animal, emotional support animal or service animal, they're looking to add to the damages any cost of training a new pet. So I don't think too many people would be worried. I just watch these bills because you could take an amendment onto anything that's germane or like subject matter. So I'm watching anything that's got service animals or pets and stick an amendment on it. So we've got to watch that. An interesting bill that we got involved with, and it has really in the beginning nothing to do with landlords, but there was a movement on the West Coast, and 5 states have passed it for the Asian community, where you are to register the ethnic background of your children. So you were, so they broke down Asian into Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, Chinese subcategory, Mandarin subcategory, Cantonese, and we're in touch. We're working closely with one really awesome woman from the Chinese woman, came from communist China to America because it was the land of opportunity, and she's a bit delusional. This was what she actually encountered here, and she goes, "We're all Americans. We don't want our kids. Our kids don't have any contact with where they came from in China, but yet this bill is requiring them to go out and check a box as to who they are." And I says, that kind of flies right in the face of fair housing, because we're told under fair housing we're all the same. You shouldn't look to see if this person's from one race or another race. After all, we're all Americans. So she mounted a campaign to basically ban the box, and it did not work out well. because there's money being appropriated to agencies that are, managing these programs. And it's kind of shocking that, here we are, we're telling everybody we're all equal and we're all the same and treat everybody fairly. But if you're of Asian descent, we want all of these subcategories, we want to know who you are, because to better serve your needs. And so that's a bill that 5415, and it's health equity data. Health equity data. So basically, it's the government looking to data mine, and it came out of this proposal to have Connecticut be the first state to say that it wasn't appropriate to be asking children to identify their nations or provinces of origin when they're going through school. So we had this Asian registry for kids that kind of got flipped into this health equity data collection bill. So I mean, we're just going to make sure that bill never sees the light of day in the Senate. But we got rent control. You've got you've got the licensing bills out there. At the end of the day, Ed, I think most of this stuff's going to die because they haven't even begun the debate on the budget, and they've got to go through that, and that's we're 6 days away, and in order to kill any of these bills, the one trick, because the Senate works a lot differently than the House, the Senate will not really get into action until the last couple of days. And then they meet and they say, all right, so we've got to pass these 150 bills. We can't talk about them. So which ones do we agree that we can both live with? And they create something called a consent calendar. And both parties will consent that these bills are okay. And they'll pass 50 bills, 60 bills, in without any debate. So anything that makes up to the Senate, all we need to do is to make sure that we are telling people do not place these bills on consent. You want a full and formal floor debate. And once you get on the floor, you don't have to relinquish your time. So just create a talker. So you could talk about a bill for 2, 3, 4 hours, filibustering it. So that's kind of our strategy right now at this late date, is some of the bills that we think are harmful. We're just going to make sure they stay off the consent calendar and and they never pass this session.
Okay. So any final words before we go?
Yeah, I just wish more landlords were paying attention to what was going on up at the state capitol. They, I get a lot of calls after the fact. I get the complaints. We should change these laws. But when we're fighting in the arena, where are these guys? And I think the landlords, for all the power they have, all the wealth that they have, they do a real poor job of working together, because if they really organized and then they can sort of bring some of their tenants along with them, they would be unstoppable on policy. But they don't work well together, I think. That's my last thought.
Okay. All right. So this is I'm Ed Weinberg. We were just with Bob DeCosmo, and we want to thank everybody for tuning in. And please let me know you are here. If you're here, if you're watching the replay, please hit the like, leave a comment. We can have discussions on any of this after we're done. And so I'm Ed Weinberg. I am a realtor at Keller Williams Realty in Trumbull, and I run a group called CTRE Investors, which also has a website, CTRE Investors, and you can find my own website at edsellsmyhouse.com or on Facebook at Ed Sells My House. So everybody, you have a great day, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.